that they're there because I treat warnings as errors, and frequently they are. One of the worst errors that is only a warning if you compile with GCC or Clang is if you have a function that should return a value, particularly a Boolean value, and you don't return a Boolean value, all that GCC will give you is a warning, and it won't even give you that if you don't use the -w all. Now, the problem with that is if you don't return a value, there's a default value that gets returned for you, and it can either be false or true depending upon the system you compile it or run it on. And you compile it on one system, it returns false and works great, and you think you're in good shape, but you got this warning, oh, that's just a warning. You move to another system, and all of a sudden it doesn't work, and you think it's the system. These people don't know how to install, and it's your code. So warnings frequently show up as errors later, so that's why I get rid of them. But that said, Valgrind will give you errors and leaks that aren't errors or leaks because of this zlib issue. I might talk to Scott Duckworth about that at some point, but you'll find that in the Valgrind directory. Let's just revisit vectors for a minute. So what I've got here is a simple number class. In fact, just to try to get this all on one page, let me show you all I'm doing. I'm not doing much. So I guess that last one wasn't such a good idea. I'm trying to get it all on so you can see. So all I'm doing is printing output when there's ever a constructor or assignment operator is called. So I guess, and we don't even need this. Let's just get rid of this. And so my question that I'd like to ask you is, and you'll see this again, I think, is what's the output of this program? What I have here is a variable that I'm declaring. The variable name is vec. Brilliant name. And it's of type vector of class number. And I'm going to do something here. I'm calling the constructor with passing a 10. What's the output? What? Just one convert? Copy? One copy? No output? How many say no output? No output? Let's try it and see what happens. Move. Copy constructor got called 10 times. Now, actually, notice the default got called once, and then the copy constructor got called. Why is that? Well, that is because when you do this, you reserve 10 spaces, and so it needs the default constructor to get the first one, and then it makes copies and fills up the next 10. So if I print the size of this vector at this point, if I print size and capacity, what will I get? I'll get 10 and I'll get 10. Okay, so let me convince you that that's the case. And then I have an even better question. Okay, so the size is 10 and the capacity is 10. What if I do a pushback right here? Then what is size and what is capacity? Size is 11, what's capacity? 20. 20. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, I never liked vectors anyway. I never liked them. I'm just going to switch to, I like C. C's the perfect language. Why don't we just go back to perfection? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do and so I asked you now, what's the output? Do you know what I just did? I've declared an array called num of type number size 10. What's the output now? What is it?
10 defaults.
10 defaults. You got it. It's going to be 10 defaults. Okay, let's see if that's the case. Did I save this? I hope I saved it. Okay? Why do I want you to be aware of that? So that you'll know what you're doing, for God's sake. What's the right way to do this problem? Ah, somebody said it. What? Use reserve. Probably what you want to do, I'm not sure. Probably what you want to do is not this, but you should probably do what I told you to do, which is vec dot reserve 10. I want you to know this. Do you know why I want you to know this? I mean, wouldn't it be weird if you'd done what I did the first time and thought you were reserving 10 and did a pushback and printed the 0th one and it wasn't there and you couldn't find it? And you'd be saying, geez, where'd it go? Well, it went in location 11. What's the output now? I hear the right answer being mumbled. 0 and 0. Okay, the output is going to be 0 and 0. Okay, we just convinced you. You see now why Dr. House won't use vectors or STL? Oops. Oh, sorry. I wondered why you were looking at me weird. Well, you look at me weird all the time. But yeah, size is 0. Size is 0, which means if I do a pushback, what size and capacity then? 1 in 10. You got it. Mm-hmm.
So when you're calling a vector inside a constructor and you want to initialize it, do you initialize it
with the default? So here's what Casey's asking me. He's saying, suppose I have a class A and I want to declare a vector to be private, you know, and I have a, say, std : vector of int v, and you know, and then I have a. Scott Myers is going to say that's no good, and he's going to say, I'm going to get a warning. What is it, W effective? Is that it? Yeah. You're going to get that warning. You said, damn, Malloy wants me to get rid of that. I don't know how to get rid of that. I hate that guy. So what do? You just go like this, and you call the default. You call the default constructor for vector v, and now the warning is gone. Okay? And all Scott Myers is saying is that you need to explicitly call the default constructor for this. He wants you to explicitly do it. Yeah?
In our first example where we put a 10 in the parentheses, why did it do default once and copy 10 times?
Because it didn't have any, because it wants to use copy. It always uses copy to put stuff in, but it doesn't have anything to copy. So it uses the default constructor to get some initial value. Okay, so it gets that initial value and then it copies that 10 times. Otherwise, you can't use copy to, to make it, because it doesn't have anything to copy, I guess. And that's the thing to remember. What you put into the vector is not what you put in the vector. And what you take out of the vector is not what was in it. Okay, it's a copy.
So is there any way to like
reserve 10 here?
No, when you use that default vector constructor, it's just copying nothing.
Well, whenever your default constructor had in it.
Okay.
If your default constructor initializes number to 0, it's going to put a 0 there.
Yeah.
You won't have garbage. It'll use your default constructor to initialize it. If you don't have a default constructor, what does it do?
It does a shell.
It'll make one for you. And who knows what it'll put in number. It's system dependent. Does that help, Will?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's I think that's that. Let's talk about the factory, I think, next. The factory and the flywork. Let's go there next. So, and in so doing, I guess what I want to do, let's go to your project directory and just bring up the write-up for a moment. And I guess what I want to show you here is the old class diagram. This is the old class diagram. This is what we had been doing. So what we were doing is we had all this stuff in Manager. Manager was managing our assets. Okay? The Manager was managing our frames, our surfaces, and our sprites. It was managing too much. And you allocate too much responsibility to the class, and it's hard to reason about the class, about the correctness of the class. And if you allocate stuff all around and every class takes responsibility for itself, then you have a good chance of getting it right. Okay? I'm trying to remember too many things. I walked out of the house this morning without a belt. It's so embarrassing. I called my wife and she said, well, get a power cord to it. She said, they're all nerds, they won't notice. Anyway, so you forget things when you have too much to do. If one class has too much to do, and really, you want that class, you'd like that class to manage all of its own resources. However, we have efficiency considerations in mind. Namely, surfaces are huge. It's probably the largest asset by far in your animation, unless you consider the vector of those. And so if we can have only one surface and one frame and draw it at 100 different locations and make it look like we got 100 of them, we get a big win. That's two orders of magnitude win. Okay, and so that's a victory. So what we did in the first project is we had the surface and the frame here, and we passed it over to the sprite. We made an aggregate of them. So we're not going to do that now. Okay, so we're not going to do that now. What we're going to do is we're going to have our manager not worry about that. So our manager class will only worry about the sprites. Okay, so it'll only have a sprite. We still want to manage these things efficiently. So what the manager will do is it will create, this is a class diagram, and that's aggregation. It'll create an aggregation of sprites. Okay? And it, of course, a sprite needs a surface, and it needs a frame. Actually, it doesn't need a surface, does it? It really doesn't need the surface. It only needs the frame. And then it tells the frame to draw itself. So then what it does is it has a frame, and the frame has the surface. So the frame has the surface. It's an SDL surface star, if you want me to do that. And for this whole aggregation, we'd like to get away with just one frame and one surface. Can we do that in all situations? Right, we cannot. We cannot always do that. Well, when can we not? Well, normal sprites flying around. I mean, the typical, let's call it the typical sprite. What I'm trying to do is show you how I arrived at my design, so that you can say, wait, it's not going to work for this type of sprite or whatever. So you can help me. So what types of sprites are we going to have? We'll kind of have your average, one frame, single frame sprite. Okay, so that's one type. This will work fine. We might have another type that rotates, a rotating sprite. Will that work for this? Or will they all rotate? If we've got 100 all using the same surface and we rotate the surface, what happens? I think they might all rotate. How about for multi-frame sprite? This will be okay for a multi-frame sprite. How about a scaled sprite? By a scaled sprite, your third project, I'm going to ask you to use Painter's algorithm, and that's the one that I did. I got a bunch of they're sprites. They're not sprite stars, so it takes a while to start up. Oh wait, I got to use this cheat code. These guys are exploding me. Leave me alone. See it? I like this cheat code. So what I'm doing is it's all one sprite, but I've scaled it. And I draw the little ones in the back and the big ones in the front. That's a scaled sprite. How about a two-way multi-frame sprite? How about a two-way multi-frame sprite? Will this scheme work for that?
What do you mean by two-way?
Okay, what could I possibly mean by? What do I mean by a two-way? Here's a two-way. So that cat's going to the right. What I'd like him to do is be able to turn around, but he'll just have to go backwards, that's all. Oh, he turned around, that's a two-way. Okay, what would a four-way do? Did you ever hear of 2.5D? Yeah, it's cool if you can do it. So that's a two-way multi-frame sprite. Goes both directions. So the question I want to ask you is, which of these will work? So how am I going to do this then? What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a factory, frame factory, right here. Okay, and the old frame factory that I had there, in fact, if you go to your repo and go to tracker.old, the way I did it before, don't do it this way. I left it there just in case you wanted to look at it. I wasn't storing the surfaces. I was only storing the frames, you see? I only had a vector of frame star, and that wasn't working for me. So I'm not doing it that way. I changed it to, so the way it's going to work now is the frame factory is going to store what? Well, it's going to have a map. So a map is a data structure. It's an STL container that has a key and a value pair. Okay? So a map has a key and a value. Okay? And the maps that I like usually use a string and something else. Okay? And then I can get at these, I can index off of this key. Okay? Whereas with a vector it has to be an integer. But here it can be a key. So I can say m of cat equals 3.5. And that will store this value, it will map this value, of course this has to be float in that case, and it will map this string to that value for me. So what I'm going to have is, I'm going to have a frame factory in which I have maps for the surfaces and the frame, and their corresponding frames. And I'm going to access them by their name. Okay? Every drawable has a name. Green orb, red star, whatever. And how is this map going to work? Well, this map, these maps are going to work such that, let's suppose you have a map for green orb. You have a sprite called green orb. This guy, when this guy wants to, in his constructor, in the sprite constructor, it's going to try to make itself. And to make itself, it needs a frame, and the frame needs a surface. Now, originally, I was storing the frame in the, I was storing the surface in the frame. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm storing the surface here. So this guy's going to say, okay, give me a frame for a green orb. Where green orb is a string, probably in your XML file. It's a string in your XML file that identifies one of the kinds of sprites running around in your program. One of the kind of sprites that's running around in your program. So it's going to come over here, and this map is going to say, okay, this turkey wants a green orb. All right. And it's going to look in the map. Is the green orb in the map? If it's already there, it's already made the frames, and the surface is there already. It's just going to pass the frames over here, whether it's a sprite or even a multi-sprite. If it's a multi-sprite, it's going to pass the vector frames, because you've got many, maybe a 4-frame, a 20-frame, whatever. It's going to pass a vector of frames. So there are two methods here, get frame. There are two methods here that are important for you. Get frame and get frames. Okay? And how are they different? Well, get frame is going to return, and they both take a string. That's all they take, is a string. They each take a string. I wrote this for you already. I used to make students write this one, the get frames for multi-frame sprites. But I've changed the design, and I'm worried that you won't do it right. So I actually wrote that one for you. Now, get frame is going to look and see if those frames are already in the map. If they're already in the map, it's going to send them back. If it's a multi-frame sprite, you'll call get frames for that. If they're already there, it'll pass the vector back. And you'll just reuse that stuff. Now, what that means is that this guy needs a frame to draw. Where does it get it? It gets it from there. So what we're assuming is that these assets are going to be there for probably the life of the animation. Now, if you want to delete them or something, I don't know. We can talk about that. But essentially, this guy's going to do all the newing and the deleting of frames and surfaces. This guy right here is responsible for making frames and deleting them at the end of the program so there are no damn leaks. Okay, we don't need a plumber. So that's what this guy does. My question to you is, that will work for which of these? You got to know. Well, it'll work for this one. It'll work for this one, and it'll work for this one. I don't think it'll work for this one. In fact, I'm sure it won't. And I don't think it'll work for that one, will it, Paul? Won't they all, unless you want them all to rotate. So I think that one, if you want all this, if you want to hit R and have them all rotate just for laughs, because you're in charge, go for it. Yeah.
Yes, it will work.
Why work?
I think it'll work.
Yeah.
It will.
Oh, we don't even, okay, will it?
Because that's what I was doing. I just had one surface, but they all rotated points in here.
Oh, cool, okay then, I'm sorry.
Well, I don't know about scale.
I don't think the scale, oh, I did the wrong one. Is somebody, here's an eraser. So it won't work for scale, you meant this.
I think.
Okay. So you're saying no for this and yes for this. Now, I know it won't work for these because I've done the scaled sprites. And so what I did with the scaled sprites is I don't use the factory. I don't use the factory. What I do is each scaled sprite's got a different size surface. So in my scaled sprite, each scaled sprite has its own surface, has its own frame or vector of frames, and that scaled sprite is in charge of making and deleting all of those assets. So this guy handles all of its own assets. Okay? And does not use the frame factory. If you use the frame factory, you're surrendering management of those assets to the factory. And this is almost a flyweight. By a flyweight, now if you look in the Gang of Four book under the flyweight pattern, the example it gives you is the character. So they make an editor in there. It's an editor. And when they make their editor, they reuse the A in all the letters. They only read the letters in once, like we're doing. They only read the letters in once, and they reuse that letter. Okay? So their letter A is a flyweight for all the A's that it uses in the editor. So our frame is like a flyweight in the sense that it's going to be all the same kinds of sprite. Now, the intent of the flyweight pattern is that the flyweight's typically used for primitives. Now, a surface is not a primitive, so we might violate the intent somewhat, but certainly the structure of the flyweight is there. So our structure is a flyweight. Okay, ask any questions you want. Because I'm going to look at the code. Now, yeah.
So if it's not there, it's going to look at the name that you passed in and then use that, grab that out from the XML.
Let me show you the code. Let's look at the factory now. Okay, so let me show you what I've done. So what I've put in here is, the only drug I do is caffeine, and I gotta stop. It's a bad thing to get it. I mean, how many of you drink caffeine? We gotta kick this habit. Don't start. And if you need caffeine while you're in here because I'm so boring, it's all right with me. Caffeine is what we're talking about, nothing else. Okay. So, what I want to show you first is the manager. And I know I said we'd look at the frame factor. Why do we want to look at the manager? Because I want you to see that it's cleaner. Oh, you know what I mean by that? Cleaner. So, what I have now is the screen upon which I draw everything. But the manager doesn't make that asset. Who makes that asset? What? No, well, not the factory actually. The I/O manager. The I/O manager makes this screen. If you want a screen, you go through the I/O manager to get it. Okay, make sure you do that. Let me just show you that, where it does it. And I've done that all the time. So if you look at iomanager.cpsc, in the constructor, it makes the screen right here. You can only have one screen in SDL unless you use 2.0 or greater. And I might switch maybe next year. But right now I'm only using SDL, I think it's 1.2. So you can only have one screen. And I make it right here. And that's the screen. You go get that whenever you want to write, whenever you want to draw onto something. That's the one you pass around. If you create another screen, the results are undefined. Okay, so that's that one. So, this guy doesn't really make any assets. Well, the IO manager makes that. All the things I stick in here are going to be made by the frame factory. So it doesn't make anything, so it doesn't need any surfaces. I'm just using this to make it easier to draw stuff, I guess. I probably don't need that. I may be able to get rid of that asset. I need my world, I need my viewport, and I have a vector of drawable star. Now what I wanted you to do in the first project is to have a vector of sprite, because it's hard to do sprites, a vector of sprites right. For example, let me show you one of the nice solutions to our well, let me find them. So let me just show you a real nice one, this first one. I thought it looked good. I have to go pretty far to get there. Okay, nice. And what happens is, every time a ball, this is atoms. Every time a ball hits a hole, he deletes it. See, one hit the hole. There, one hit that hole. We made, oh, one hit a hole. Oh. Okay, you get, I'm not going to wait. So, and he did it the way I wanted him to do it. So in his manager.h, he has a vector of sprite. And what that tells me, the fact that his animation works correctly, and he has a vector of sprite, tells me that he wrote his copy constructor correctly and his assignment operator correctly. If he hadn't, let me just show you if he hadn't. He did. Let's suppose he had. Let's suppose he's a turkey. Okay, let's come down here. He doesn't know what he's doing. And yet, he's got an assignment operator, and he decides he doesn't need one of those fields. Whoa! Whoa! Where'd they go? Did you see what happened? Oh, that was quick. That was quick. That's a hard bug to find. That's a hard bug to find. However, you just happen to have your copy of Myers. Happen to have your copy of Myers. I'll never find it. Which one is it? 12. Copy all parts of an object. All parts. Not just the ones you feel like. Okay, copy all parts of an object. So when you write your assignment operator, you want to copy all parts. Why? Well, because when you take a vector, when you take an object out of a vector, guess what it uses? The assignment operator. It uses the assignment operator. Surprise. Now you see why Dr. Haas won't use the STL? Oh, I'm not touching that thing. You know, you don't know how it works. He'll tell you how it works. And if you don't know how it works, when you use it, you're setting yourself up. Okay, you're setting yourself up. Now, I want you to know how they work. I want you to know how the standard template library works, because it's really efficient. I once tried to write a linked list routine to beat the linked list in the standard template library. I spent 3 days, and I wasn't coming close. And then I said, shucks, I'm going to use memory pooling. And I used memory pooling, and I beat it. Only because I cheated a little by knowing what the objects were going to be like. Standard template library list is really efficient. You try to beat it. You try to do an insert and delete, and you won't beat it. It's really efficient. So it's advantageous, and plus yours won't work right. You know? And this one will, if you know how it works. If you know how it works. And I want you to know how it works. That's how mean I am. So, therefore, what are we getting at here? In this project, I want you to have a polymorphic list. So, what I'd like you to have is a base class polymorphic list. So I want you to have a base class of drawable star And I want you to have a derived class with a sprite, a multi-frame sprite, or a two-way multi-frame sprite maybe. And I better not. And then you'll have a drawable star. You can put them all in there if you want. You can put them all in there. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, if you want us to do it, why don't you do it? I did. Already did. I did it for you. So what am I going to put in here? What am I going to put in this list of drawable star? Well, here's what I'm going to put in there. Just to show you that it can be done, I've already done it for you. And there are no leaks. I know what you're thinking. It's probably got leaks. This won't move. There, I did it. Okay, so what do I put in here? And who asked me? I think it was you, Casey. I have a vector of sprites, default constructor. Was it you or someone else? Huh?
I think I said that.
Yeah. And I'm putting a multi-sprite and two sprites. And I just tell them to go draw themselves. Just go draw yourself. Go update yourself. They're taking care of themselves with the help of the frame factor. So all I do here is say, push back a new multi-sprite called star. Why is it called star? Because that's what I called it in the XML. A green orb and a stupid red star. Okay, so that's what I'm doing. And if I compile this and run it, you'll see there's already, this is a multi-frame sprite. I did this in Inkscape. It's pitiful. It's so easy, isn't it? You just elongate the things, the spokes. And then I can switch. I can track something else. Now I'm tracking the green orb. Now I'm tracking the little star. Okay? And so the sprite, what does the sprite do? The sprite says, well, I'm derived from drawable. The sprite is derived from drawable. So I got to call my constructor in the base class, and I got to tell it what my XY coordinate is and what my speed is. And of course, I'm a good data-driven programming guy. So it's coming from the XML. I go get my frame where, from the factory, tell the factory, go get the frame. What's the name of the frame? Whatever name I passed in here. I can reuse this for different kinds of sprites. And that's it. I use the frame factory. And guess what? It's a singleton. I know they accuse me of overusing it. They're wrong. Now we get to the frame factory, which I spent all day rewriting and putting tons of comments. So read them. So, there they are. Get frame, and get frames. What's the difference? Get frame returns a frame. Get frames returns a vector of them. Okay? Where does it get the surfaces? Right here. All the surfaces are in there. You with me? Okay. Try to delete that darn stuff. Because there ain't no memory leaks in that thing. And that's all it is. That's all I got. Well, I got a few things. I got my surfaces, I got my multi-surfaces, I got my frames, and my multi-frames. Okay, let's look at the frame factory.cpp. There's the destructor. Because I can't have any leaks. If I have leaks, you know what you'll say? Here's what you'll say. Well, your program had leaks. So mine's allowed to have leaks. That's what you'll do. So what do? I get rid of the surfaces. I get rid of them all. You wouldn't have written this right, so I said I got to do it for this or that. Okay, because it's a vector of them. So I go a while loop using an iterator. I use a while loop to iterate through the map, but I have a vector of them, so I can just use the easy way. Delete the surfaces of I. You'd have gotten it wrong. Then I have to delete the multi-frames, take a look at the code, and ask yourself, you know, he did that for me, it's a good thing. It's a present. It's a present from me to you. Here's getFrame. Let's look at getFrame. What happens in getFrame? I pass the name of this sprite into getFrame. It looks for it. Right there it looks for it. Right here. Line 42. Too long. Too long. By one character. It says pose. This is an iterator that's going to point to the location in the map where that thing exists. It's going to point to the location in the map where it found that, or it's going to point at enda. Enda is one past the enda of the map. Okay, so what I do right away is I say, well, if I found the enda, what do I have to do? I got to make it. I got to make it. I got to make it. So I'm going to make it. First, I need the surface. I load the stupid surface using the XML and the name. Make it transparent, maybe. Could be a background. Put the surface in the map. Don't forget. Get the frame. Put the frame. Build the frame. Stick the frame in the map. And return the frame. That's the first time. But if it's already there, just return it. See how efficient it is? First time it makes it, second time it passes it back. Third time, fourth, and so forth. Even for the vector of them. So here is where I get a vector. So I'm passing back a vector. I'm passing it back by value. Is that right? Ooh. Is it right?
If you did it differently, you have a pointer to a vector, that's our.
Yeah, I think you're right, Patrick. I'm sure you're right. It's not hitting me why you think that. I'm sure he's right. Let me think about why. I'm sure you're right. Okay, that's all there is to it. Then the last thing I think to look at, but I'll look at anything you want. It's PG rated. And then, of course, I commented the heck out of this. And I've got several different kinds of constructors. And you may need to add some if you want. But it has no destructor. Okay? Read what that comment says there. Ryan, read that out loud.
Restoring the surface in the frame factory.
No, read out loud.
Restoring the surface in the frame.
To the whole class. Can you all hear? You're Cicero. You're an orator.
Restoring the surface in the frame factory more consistency. Therefore, this class stores nothing on the heap, and object deletion will be faster and consistent.
Do you believe him? The system can delete this class faster than I can. And there's nothing for me to delete. So some people put an empty destructor here. But that empty destructor will get called, and that will be slower than if the system does it. So I didn't do it. So I'm not storing anything in the frame. So therefore, you have to think about the fact, if you're going to scale your sprites, you don't want to use the frame factor. Now, any questions, please ask. Or do you think that there's a problem? Yeah.
When you're earning the things from the map in the frame manager, you have like
Wait, in the frame factory?
frame factory, yeah. There's like arrow second, position, and an arrow second.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yes. Okay. So unlike a vector, if you want to run through a map, you have to use an iterator. You've got to run through it with an iterator. You can't. Now, you know, with a vector, you have the choice of iterating through with an iterator or using the bracket notation like as if it were an array. But a map, you've got to use an iterator. And I use an algorithm, the find algorithm, in the standard template library. When you iterate through, let's suppose your iterator is called pointer. Pointer first is that guy, and pointer second is that guy. Okay? It looks funny, doesn't it? I mean, how they came up with that, I don't know. But pointer first is the key. Pointer second is the value. So, let's take a look. I want to go over maps someday. Someday. So if I go to your place, let me see if I put it in there. I may not have stuck it in there yet. Yeah, I stuck a little maps example. Okay? So how do I put something in the map? One way is to do this. You with me? Whoops. What's the output? What is it?
Cat's the same every time.
Okay, let's make it a little more interesting. Yeah, the answer is 17. How many times will it print it? 4 times. Oh. Oh, you're right. You're right. Yeah, let's fix it. How do I, tell me what to do here. Cat 2? Did you ever hear a cat dog? I mean, cut me a break. You know, I can see them eating. It's the other part that worries me. You know? Now what's the output? So our output will be cat 77, cat dog 35, and dog 27. What? So we get cat 77, cat dog 35. Here's our output. Our output is cat 77. How many watched Cat Dog? I know, I did too. My kids watched, so I didn't have a choice. Cat Dog 35 and Dog 27. That's my output. Am I wrong?
Will it be in that order?
Huh?
Will it be in that order?
Did I blow it up? What?
Will it be in that order?
In that order. In that order, of course. Of course it'll be in that order. Whoa, why is it, why is that the order? What, somebody said the order.
Is it sorted?
Yeah, it's sorted. Of course it's sorted. Of course it's sorted. It uses a red-black tree, which worst case lookup is log of n. Dr. Dean will prove it to you. Go ask him. On his way to his car, he'll prove it. Oh yeah, you just diagonalization and you do it. I don't know. Okay. All right. Are we okay with this? Yes.
How does the map know that the cat or can you prove the code?
You want me to bring that code up again? Because the C and the A and the T are the same in both cases.
What if we mess with the constructors and copy?
What constructor?
Strings.
It's in the standard template library. Are you going to modify the standard template library? You don't like it? Is it what? Not enough constructors? What? I'm sorry, I'm actually missing your question.
I thought like string was a class that we defined.
Oh, well, we could. We could. It will be probably not work very well, but what?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
It uses reference count and pointers. The one in the standard template library uses reference count and pointers. It'll be better than yours. The only time you have to write your own string class is for my exam. Try concatenation. In other words, if you assign to the same string twice, then you replace the previous value. Is that what you're asking me?
I just wanted to know that if we write a class, I mean, if we use a different key there instead of string, like,
You can't. If you declare your map to be string and int, I don't get your question. Do you get it, Patrick?
I was gonna ask a kind of similar question. If we have a custom class as the key, do we have to have an overloaded equality operator?
You will need an overloaded equality and copy.
So that's what, I think.
Is that what he's asking?
Yes.
Yeah. If this is one of your classes, you have to overload copy and you have to overload assignment. And copy them all the values, not just the ones you feel like it. Yeah.
So is there a way to have, and I'm not that familiar with STL, but can you have a multi-instance?
Multi-map. If you have a multi-map and you have multiple keys, it stores them in order. So if this is a multi-map, you'll have cat 17, cat 77, cat dog 35, and dog 27. So it stores them adjacently, which is nice. Sometimes you might want a multi-map. Yeah, Lauren?
In your own class, you also have to overload greater
Comparison.
than, less than, right?
Yeah, greater than, less than, and equal.
So that it can be stored.
That's right. That's right. Yep. Yep. Good point, Lauren. So if you do comparison, it's because it puts them in order. It stores them in order. So you could use a multi-map. Those are good questions. I don't know if I answered your question or not.
that was my question. When we use
Oh,
custom
okay.
class, we have to-
Thank you for asking. I didn't quite get it. Okay. Any other ones? Okay, let's take a quick through. We're at your place. Could someone read this? I'm losing my voice. Because I try to talk so you can all hear me. I know you'd like me to stop talking. Joey, you want to start reading? You have a good law voice.
From the top?
Yeah.
In order to receive credit for this assignment, your solution must be submitted using the MN command by 8 a.m. Thursday, October 3rd, 2013. There are two components to this second programming project. The first component entails adding additional features to the animation that you developed for your first project. And the second component entails refactoring your first project to reflect design improvements that would make your code easier to extend, modify, and reuse.
Okay.
You read all?
Yeah. Oh, are you tired? Jonathan, take over.
The additional features that you would add to your team, make it bigger. Make it bigger.
Make it bigger. I'm afraid that you won't all fit. Who can see it now?
Oh, yeah.
The additional features that you will add to your animation include a viewport into a larger world that tracks sprites in your animation, lots of sprites with at least 1 or 2 way multi-frame sprite, one two-way multi-frame sprite. Print text to the screen to indicate the sprite being tracked and the frame rate. Computer over the last 100 frames.
I'm already doing that for you in the IO Manager in case you hadn't noticed. Go
And a
ahead.
help facility activated with the F1 key that provides information about the sprite that is being tracked and how to switch between tracked objects.
I'll show you an example of a solution on next week. And the reason I want you to have a two-way multi-frame sprite is because currently the frame factor can't handle that. I want you to extend the frame factory to handle that because I want you to get used to the pattern. And the only way to get used to the pattern and start learning how to use it is to use it. You don't learn it by, really, that's the problem with my course. You don't learn my course by reading the notes in the bathroom. It just doesn't work that way. If you want to learn it in the bathroom, bring a laptop with you. Okay? And don't drop it in the toilet like I did with my phone. And you get that, and you got to be writing code, compiling it, make mistakes, get dirty, get wet. Not the laptop. Okay? You got to make mistakes. We're too afraid to make mistakes. That's what I like about my little kids when they were like 5 or 6. I mean, like one day I came home, he was about 7, my oldest boy, he's at the University of Utah now on a fellowship. And he said, Dad, this computer's not working. Because I would show him how to install games. I got tired of installing. I showed him how to install games. I said, it stopped working, why? He said, well, I don't know what happened, but I ran out of room. And I noticed this directory called Windows was really big. And he was smart. He said, so I put it in trash, and that didn't make more room, so I removed the trash. And he said, then it stopped working. I said, good job, Chris. I liked it that he knew enough to delete the trash. So then we spent the next 2 hours reinstalling Windows. And then reinstalling all these stupid games. Okay? But I didn't mind. I liked it. You got to make mistakes. He learned something. You know? And why get mad? I didn't get mad. I applauded him for deleting the trash. You know, I didn't applaud him for the next 2 hours, but and see, my youngest kid, he's 19. He's almost too old. You know, he's afraid to make sweating bullets. My mother, oh, I can't learn a computer. I'm too old. She could learn it. You know? Oh, I can't touch those things. You let them in your house, they'll take over. I don't know. I said, Mom, you pull the plug. Oh, you can't trust that. You know? I mean, when I call her up, I just use the word pipe bomb and she freaks. Brian, the NSA's listening to this. But they don't care if I what make it. They do. Sorry, who was reading? Keep going.
To incorporate the viewport, study the tracker code in the repository for this course. You should either, 1, use the tracker framework as a starting point, or 2, refer to your first programming project to incorporate a viewport into a larger world. I have placed the file convert to tracker.txt in the repo, and I will show you how to follow the directions in the file to convert your first project to the tracker approach.
I'll do it for you too. On Tuesday, I'll do that. I'll follow those directions. You try to do it over the weekend, okay? And then when I do it on Tuesday, you'll see the mistakes you made. Go for it, Philip.
There are examples in the repository that illustrate multi-frame sprites. Study these also. You are not required to build your own sprites for the second project, but you can receive additional points if you do. Also, please note that you may not use the sprites that I use for demonstration purposes. If you use sprites or sprite sheets that you did not build yourself, then you must acknowledge the author or site from which you obtained the sprites in the ASCII readme file included in your submission.
Okay, so let me just give you an example of what someone, I'm sure this has got to be a mistake. But someone actually submitted their project. So that's not going to get a whole lot of points because those are my sprites. It's easy to use my sprite. The XML is already done. I mean, I want you to use your own. And you know what I've discovered? It's amazing how many of you have art talent, at least graphic art talent. Graphic art talent, I think, do you think it's different from actual drawing? Yes. I think so. And I'm slow to develop this talent. I'm working on it. I've had students who didn't even know they had any art talent and could draw these beautiful sprites, and they're shocked. And especially I could think of even one undergrad who just loved drawing his own sprites, you know, and he learned Inkscape, he watched the tutorials and drew beautiful sprites. I said, oh, you've had art classes, haven't you? He said, no, I didn't even know I could do this. I mean, it's amazing what talent you people have if you just let it loose. Too often you keep it caged up because you're afraid to make a mistake. Get wet, get dirty. You can't stay clean all your life, okay? And make mistakes. So I really get a kick out of some of your sprites. I mean, they're hilarious. Of course, some of them I know you didn't draw. So anyway, Philip, you're a good reader. Do you want just one more
The
paragraph?
design improvements that you incorporate into the second project should entail refactoring your code so that the responsibility for building and maintaining assets in your animation is delegated to a factory class, where the factory is parameterized by the name of the object that is being built and maintained. A Doxygen generated class diagram for the tracker code is included in the project directory in the course repository. The tracker code also includes an approach to incorporating factory into the framework.
Okay, let me just stop you, Philip. I deleted that because it was for the old tracker and I've refactored it. And I got a Doxygen file from Casey. I'll give it to you. So it'll automatically generate a Doxygen file. So I got to redo that because I changed the code and refactored the frame factory to what I explained to you today. I'm sorry, Philip. Can you keep reading? I'll get someone else after this paragraph.
And this code is in the example/tracker directory in the course repository. Please feel free to either use the tracker code as your starting point or refactor your code from the first project. The goal of the factory is to reduce the responsibilities of your manager class and move the maintenance of sprite assets from the manager class to the factory and sprite classes. With the new design that includes the factory, sprite classes can manage their own assets efficiently because the frame class will act as a flyweight for sprite surfaces.
Yeah, and if you can't find things, by the way, the find command works like this. Find dot, start at this directory, minus iname, not case sensitive, quote, convert to tracker star quote, and go find it. That works on any Unix system. And if you're not using Unix, why not? Okay? Let me get someone else to read. Thank you, Phil. Let's skip this. You can read that over. This is the old class diagram, and this is going to change. You're going to have more than one kind of sprite. You're going to have a polymorphic vector or list. If you're deleting, you need a list. So we'll talk about lists. How about the extra here, Casey?
If you satisfy the above requirements, you will receive 90%. To receive additional points, choose draw your own multi-frame sprites, establish a criteria for removing sprites from your animation, and either delete them.
Now wait, don't do all of this. Okay, pick one or maybe two, but don't do it all. Go ahead. Sorry, Casey, start that one over.
Establish a criteria for removing sprites from your animation, and either delete them from your vector or list, or mark them for deletion, and don't draw them. Even better, maintain a memory pool of sprites, and pull removed items. Reinsert them into the list from the pool. Memory pooling is described in the mayor's text.
But his way is so complicated. He overloads a new and delete. What I propose is when you delete one, you don't delete it, you just have a free list. You stick it in the free list. It's a pointer move. And then when you want it, you put it back. But when you put it back, you have to reinitialize the velocity and the position. And any flags that are relevant, like if it hadn't been marked for deletion, unmark it. So you can remember, why create a whole new thing? Even though you're going through the factory and it's efficient, you can if you want. But this is a suggestion. It can give you a big speed up, especially for explosions. When we do explosions, I'm going to do memory pooling for you because I don't trust you. Okay? Or should I just let you do it? What do you think, Lauren? Should I let you do it or should I do it?
I think you should do it.
Okay, keep going there, Casey.
3, implement and incorporate an L system into your animation.
I got to show you how to do those. You never even heard of them.
4, implement and incorporate a dynamic L system into your animation. 5, use the observer design pattern.
If you know the design, the observer, and you use it successfully, I'll give you lots of points. Because I've never been able to figure out how to work it in. And Dr. Holstrom says it's the only pattern he uses. And I'm not using it. And I can never, and I ask him, well, where can I use it? And he says, oh, you'll figure it out. But I'm like you, Lauren. Go ahead, Brian, Dr. Malloy, you go ahead and do the polling. I don't mind. You know, so if anybody can figure out a way to use the observer pattern, I'm going to run it by the expert. Actually, Dr. Hallstrom's PhD thesis was on patterns, design patterns. He actually really, you know, I kid a lot about him, but he really is smart, and he knows how to use them. There's two people I go to, three people that always give me the right answer. Four. They'll always give you the right answer or say they don't know. One is Dr. Geis. If he can't do it, it can't be done. I'm actually serious. I've been to PhD defenses where he asked a student why they didn't do it a certain way. And the student says, well, it can't be done that way. He says, I'll do it for you. He goes home and does it. I mean, and so Dr. Geis, Dr. Hallstrom, Dr. Levine, and Dr. House. Anytime they tell me something, I can take it to the bank. Okay? Take it to the bank. Or else they'll say, I don't know. So, sorry, keep going.
6. Extend the world class so that it scrolls tremendously vertically.
Now, I'm going to go over the viewport and world class on Tuesday. Currently, it'll extend as far as you want horizontally. You might want to write a vertical scroller or something. If you extend it to work there, I'll give you some extra beyond the 90. Keep going.
7. Intercept a keystroke that causes one of your sprites to rotate or something.
Some of you already did this, I know. And I'll try to show this. Go ahead.
8. An idea of your own, but not a future requirement. Please check.
So don't do Painter's algorithm, because we're going to do that next. And don't use parallax scrolling, because I'm going to show you how to do that. In fact, it almost comes for free with this code. So check with me, and I'll let you know if it's a great idea. I'm sorry, we're out of time. But before you go, do you have any questions about the project or anything else? All right, thanks a lot. You're a great audience. You're a great group. Keep asking lots of questions. You can do that, yeah. What's your name? I don't know. There are a couple that are empty. I already put it down, but I'll look for it. Send me an email.